Today's daf we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf Tzadi Daled. Today's daf is sponsored by Nancy Kalani in honor of her daughter-in-law Lisa Kalani's birthday. She brings light, love, and learning into the lives of her family and friends. Today's daf is sponsored by Caroline Ben Ari in loving memory of her mother Daphne Rhodes, Daphne Devora Bat Avraham V'Chana on her 8th yahrzeit. Okay, we're going to get started now with the bottom of Tzadi Gimel Amud Bet. So what we saw at the end of yesterday's daf, we'll start with the point that we're going to take a jump off from, which is Rabbi Tanchum said in the name of Bar Kapara and Tzipori that the Shem Olam Etein Lo Asher Lo Yikaret is about Daniel, that he got a book named in his name, and that is his legacy. Then we said, okay, well, then why did Nehemiah get a legacy, and why is Ezra and Nehemiah, right, called Ezra and not Nehemiah? Okay, the part that Nehemiah said, which again, that's different than what it is now, because now we call one Ezra, one Nehemiah. But in those days, everything was called Ezra, and they had two reasons. The second reason was because Rav Yosef said he was disrespectful to the people who were before him, particularly Daniel. Where do we see that? Because he said, the people who were before me, and they put these taxes on the people. And Daniel had gone to Babylonia, so he was living in Israel originally, so he must have been referring to Daniel and the people because they were before Nehemiah. So then they said, and that's because even though Daniel was greater than him, he put him down. So now how do we know that Nehemiah was greater than Daniel? Now, just to clarify, Daniel wasn't really a prophet either, okay? Nehemiah wasn't a prophet, Daniel wasn't a prophet. He did see this dream, and that kind of puts him in this in-between category, but he wasn't exactly a prophet. So that's why they brought at the end of the daf, well, he was greater than Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, who were prophets, and since Nehemiah wasn't a prophet, and if Daniel is higher than the prophets, then obviously Daniel is higher than Nehemiah. That was the whole theory, and that's where we got to yesterday. Now we're just going to point out that in comparing him, right, well, how do we compare? Because it said that he saw this vision. No one else saw the vision. The people that were with him were scared, but they didn't see the vision. We're going to have to figure out why were they scared if they didn't see the vision. We'll get back to that. But now they're going to compare. So we already compared it. We said Daniel was obviously in a higher place than them because he saw something they didn't see. And the obvious is it's Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, because who else would have been in the pool of people who would see, because living in his time they were the only prophets. So now they say, Inu adifa mineh v'iu adif minayu. They're greater than him in some way, and he was greater than them in some way. Inu adifa mineh, he was greater than him in some way because the inu nevi'eh v'iu lav nevi'eh. Okay, as we said before, they were nevi'im and he wasn't a prophet. But iu adif minayu di'u chazav ve'iu nu lo chazu. Right? He saw, they didn't see this vision. So again, each one had some up on the other, but either which way they were both in a higher place than Nehemiah, and that goes back to the Nehemiah issue. Now we're going to ask that question. So why were they scared if they didn't see the vision? Right? You would think the vision might have scared them, but they didn't see the vision. Even though they didn't see the vision, their mazal saw. You know, some people say that means their angel, like their guardian angel. Okay, so they might not have seen, but they had a guardian angel. Kind of each one has their own guardian angel, and that angel saw, and that made them scared. And now comes Ravina with a fascinating comment. Hi, and this is for psychologists among you or psychiatrists. I'm a Ravina Shmamina. Hi, Mandimibit. If you see someone who has some fear and they don't know what they're scared of, right? People have all these fears and they can't exactly, it's not tangible. They can't figure out what exactly is causing it. Even though they don't actually see what it is, mazale chaze. It's that their guardian angel sees it. Okay, that doesn't really help us. If you want to be a psychologist, say how are you going to deal with that problem? So, right, point is there's obviously something there. It's just you can't see it. And someone else sees it for you, and that's what makes you scared. So, my takante, Kamar wants to know, so how do you help resolve this issue? Lynch of miduchte arba agar mide. Okay, jump from your place 4 cubits, like kind of switch locations. Okay, inami, right? It's always helpful when you're scared of something, just to kind of move to some other place. Inami, likrei kriyat shma. This is where we get say shma, right? People who are scared all the time, they say shma. It comes from here. V'ikai b'komatinofet. What if you're in a place where it's dirty and you can't say shma? Lemahachi. This is what you should say. The following incantation: Iza debei tabacha shamina minai. The goat in the slaughterhouse is fatter than me. Now we can look at this in 2 ways. As always with Shidim, evil spirits, and that You could look at it from, this is an incantation meant to tell the evil spirit, go find someone fatter, better than me. Okay, we're going to see this fatter is going to come up later, how fat is a good thing. Right? Not in our day where everyone's always, oh, fat is bad, but it's a good thing. So go find, right? You always rather eat an animal with more fat. There are bigger, what do you say? Bigger, whatever to fry, right? So go find someone else, and that's a way to get the evil spirit or whatever it is that's scaring you to leave you. But the obvious other interpretation is it's psychological, and you're saying to yourself, to convince yourself that, there's this evil spirit doesn't really need to be bothering me because probably they'll deal, I'm not really that important, and hopefully they'll move to somebody else. And it's a way of kind of working on yourself. Okay, next. L'marbeh hamischa u'l'shlom ein ketz. Okay, now we're getting off on a total different tangent. We're going to Sancheriv and Chizkiyahu. Okay, the big story of Sancheriv and Chizkiyahu. How are we getting to this, and why are we getting to this? Good question. So the first drasha we're going to see is Rabbi Tanchum, who was Darash Bar Kapara B'tzipuri. Okay, B'tzipuri. He quotes the Bar Kapara Darshan, which is exactly how we remember. That's why I started with it today. So you'd see the connection, which is that was about Zeh Sefer Daniel Shenikra Shmo, and he darshan a pasuk Shem Olam Aten Lo Asher Lo Yikaret. Okay, I will give him a name that will last forever. So that seems to be why we're here. But this whole issue is going to deal with Mashiach, which we mentioned on yesterday's stuff as well, with the 6 Seorim and the Mashiach. It deals with, a little bit about Messianic times, which is also connected to the chapter. And we're going to be on a very long tangent. It's going to go through tomorrow's daf as well. I can't remember. I think it also goes, I'm not sure if it even goes on to the daf after, but it's definitely a very long section about the battle of Chizkiyahu and Sancheriv. Okay, the important thing to know, Chizkiyahu was a good king. He was a king of the Judean kingdom, very positive king. In fact, we're going to see, the first thing we're going to see is he was meant even to be the Mashiach. Okay, he was meant to be the Messiah. We'll see why he loses it. Sancheriv comes to battle. Now, Sancheriv was the king of Ashur, the Assyrian king. They were the ones who sent off the Israelite kingdom to exile, and then they come to attack Jerusalem. But in the end, they don't succeed. Happens is the night they settle, right? They put on a siege on the city. We learned about Rav Shakeh, if you remember. He was the head of their army, and he gets up on the walls of Jerusalem, and he curses God. We'll make reference to that. We'll get back to that today also. And then they stay overnight. They don't yet fight. And then an angel comes and smites the people, and they all die at night. Okay, in this miraculous way, and they're saved. So that's the background you need for right now. We'll fill in other details as we go along. We're going to quote a lot, and I'm going to try to tell you which chapter just so that you don't get, I think it'll be confusing anyway, but we're going to quote a lot of psukim from Yeshayahu. In Yeshayahu, there's a big description of this. Some of the psukim are going to be very clearly related to this battle. Some of them are going to be sort of psukim they take and connect. Some of them will be about Assyria in general, so then we'll be able to connect them because of the Assyrian theme. And we're just going to be quoting psukim from all different places today, and a little bit of Divrei Yamim and a little bit of Melachim, because these descriptions come up in different places. And again, sometimes they're just connecting psukim, even though they're not necessarily directly related to this incident. So it's going to be a lot of quoting psukim and drashot on the psukim. And it's a little bit jumpy, the daf. We're going to jump from issue to issue, but again, all connected to Sancheriv and Chizkiyahu. Okay, so we'll try to read the English translation. It'll make it easier for me to try to translate. Some of these psukim are very hard to translate exactly. Let's get it. Okay. That the government may be increased, and of peace there be no end. Okay, and the continuation is upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to establish it, to uphold justice and thorough righteousness from now and forever, etc. So now we're going to say, the issue with this pasuk is, if you look in the Tanakh, the word limirbe has a mem in it as the second letter, but it's a mem sofit, which is a mem that's supposed to go at the end of a word, which is very strange. So why is that? Amar Rabbi Tanchum, Darash Bar Kapara B'tzipori, he gave a drasha why this is. Why are they all open, right? Because a mem sofit is a closed letter, right? It goes all around. So they call it patuach and satum. A regular mem is open, right? There's openings in it. You could get in. So why is that? Well, the reason is God wanted to make Chizkiyahu the Mashiach. V'Sancheriv Gog u'Magog. Okay, we're going to see tomorrow there's a comparison between the numbers of soldiers of Sancheriv and say it's the same number of soldiers that are going to come in Gog and Magog. We see this connection. He was really this huge battle that was going to be a travesty. He was going to be Gog and Magog, which comes before the Mashiach. However, Amra Midat Adin Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but came the Midat Adin and said, right, the one who exacts justice, Ribono shel olam, Uma David Melech Yisrael she'amar kama shirot v'tishpachot lefanecha lo asito Mashiach. David HaMelech sang all these praises to God, and you didn't make him Mashiach. Chizkiyahu she'asita lo kol hanisim halalu, you did all these miracles to Chizkiyahu. V'lo amar shira lefanecha. We don't ever see him in the psukim thanking God. And according to this, he didn't thank God, not just we don't see in the psukim. Ta'aseu Mashiach, okay, and this obviously talks about the importance of hakarat hatov, right? Hakarat todah, to thank someone, hakarat hatov, to be cognizant of the fact that someone does something to you and recognize it and thank them. Lekach nistatem, and that's why the mem got sealed up, which means the opportunity for, right? Because this was all a pasuk about the greatness of the kingdom of David and about this almost future time when justice will prevail. But no, it was closed up. The opportunity was lost. Miyad patcha haaretz v'amra lefanav. Now we're going to quote another pasuk and say from here, from Yeshayahu Kaf Daled, like I said, we're jumping around, and say the land came out to bat for Chizkiyahu and said, Ribono shel olam, ani omer lefanecha shira tachat tzadik zeh. I'll do it for him, okay? V'aseu Mashiach, and make him Mashiach. Obviously, right? It's like a funny thing. Can't do something for somebody else. Patcha v'amra shira lefanav, and this is going to explain why the pasuk says that the lamb was singing to God. Here's the pasuk: Miknaf haaretz, from the corner of the land. Mirot shamanu, we heard zmirot, we heard these praises of God. Tzvi latzadik, and glory to the righteous, meaning they started singing thanks to God and said, and glorify the righteous, meaning, right, the tzaddik, meaning Chizkiyahu. Amar sar ha'olam lefanav. Okay, here's the sar ha'olam says before God, Ribono shel olam, sivyono aseh l'tzadik zeh. So the sar ha'olam said to God, you should, right, sivyono is ritzono, right, you should do what he wants and make Chizkiyahu the Mashiach. Yatzah bat kol v'amra, this is the continuation of that pasuk. Razeli, razeli. Okay, razeli, raz is a sod. It's a secret to me, meaning I'm not going to reveal the end of days. I'm not going to have the Mashiach come now. Amar Navi, okay, this is the whole pasuk. Maybe I'll read you the whole pasuk. Miknaf haaretz virot shamanu tzvi latzadik. Okay, from the edge of the earth we heard these songs, and glory to the tzaddik. Va'omar, and here's the reaction. And I will say, razili, razili. Okay, the secret's for me. The secret's for me. Oily. Okay, woe is to me. So now this is someone else responding. Woe is to me, they say, is the Navi. Amar Navi, oily, oily. You know, what a loss, what a loss. Okay, and then the pasuk ends with Bogdim bagadu ubege Bogdim bagadu. Okay, the treacherous, right, the people who committed treason, you know, did that, and the bege Bogdim bagadu, like another repeat of that. So ab matai, so they're saying that line comes to explain until when. Yatzavat kova amra, so again, a heavenly voice now comes out and says, Bogdim bagadu bege Bogdim bagadu. In other words, okay, we're going to see right now, Amarav Avitem Rabbi Yitzchak ad atu bazoze ubazoze de bazoze. In other words, there's going to be a lot of travesty and terrible things that are going to happen before that happens, okay? Meaning we have a while now till the Mashiach is going to come. Okay, another pasuk in Yeshayahu, chapter 26. Masa Duma. Masa is a word for prophecy. Okay, this is the prophecy of Duma. Eli korei miseil shomer. Okay, I heard this voice saying to me, shomer mami laila, shomer mami leil. Okay, so what does this mean? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, otomal acha memuneh al aruchot Duma shmo. Okay, the person who's in charge of the nishamot, the souls in heaven, his name is Duma. Okay, appears in all sorts of sources. Nitkabtzu kol aruchot etzel Duma. So all the nishamot, all the souls, go up to Duma and they say to him, Amrulo, shomer, right? You're the shomer, you're our guardian. Mami laila, shomer mami leil. Okay, what they're basically saying is, when is the night going to be over? Meaning, when is the redemption going to come? Amar shomer, this is the next pasuk. Amar shomer, atu boker v'gam laila. The morning will come, but also night. The morning is a sign for the redemption, but the night is a sign for the bad things that are going to happen. In other words, it's going to be a while till it happens. Im tiva'iyun ba'ayu. But if you want it to happen earlier, then pray. and shuvu and do tshuva etayu, and then it will come sooner. Okay, so it's all dependent on you and your actions. Tana mishum Rabbi Papayas. So now we have a bright in the name of Rabbi Papayas. Ginaihu lechizkiyahu v'siyato shalom rushira. We're back to our main topic. The Chizkiyahu didn't say shira to God. He didn't thank God. Achpatcha aretz v'amra shira. In other words, here we're talking about how you need a foil to realize when the land opened up. Right, that's like look how embarrassing it is. The Chizkiyahu should have, and instead the land, right, which doesn't really speak generally. Okay, so before we were saying that the land opening up its mouth was trying to say, make Chizkiyahu the Mashiach. Now we're saying, really, it showed how bad Chizkiyahu was, that he didn't do it and the land had to do it. And Kayotze b'davar talmil, just like this, we have another case. Vayomer Yitro, Baruch Hashem asher hitziel etchem. When Yitro hears what happened to them in Egypt, right, what does he say? Baruch Hashem, that saved you. Tana mishum Rabbi Papayas, the same Rabbi Papayas said, Ginaihu l'Moshe v'shishim ribo shelo amru baruch. Okay, this was a sign, again, using Yitro as a foil to Moshe and the Jewish people who didn't say Shira. Now, you might say, what do you mean? He said, well, he didn't say Baruch Hashem, right? They said Az Yashir, you can't say they didn't say Shira. They had a whole Shira at the Kriyat Yam Suf. So they say here, right? Ad Shabbat Yitro v'amar Baruch Hashem. They didn't use the words Baruch Hashem. Okay, and that they should have blessed God for what He did, and that was wrong. Okay, I was thinking also it could be Shirat Hayam was really a thanks for Shirat Hayam specifically for the splitting of the sea, but they didn't really say thank you for getting us out of Egypt. And it wasn't like they didn't show appreciation enough, obviously. Vayichad Yitro. So now we have this famous pasuk about Vayichad Yitro. What does it mean Vayichad Yitro when he heard all the things that God did to the Jewish people? Rav Shmuel, we have a debate. Rav Shmuel, Rav Amal she'avir chered chada al basaro. Chad, Vayichad from the lashon of sharp. He put a sharp instrument on his body, meaning he circumcised himself. Shmuel Amar shenasach chidudim al basaro. Okay, some people explain this. He had cuts to his flesh. Okay, cuts all over his flesh, which means it was hard for him. He suffered when he heard it. Why? Amarav. This is what people say. Giora, convert, ad asara dare, lo tivzera maikame. Don't humiliate a Gentile in front of a convert for up to 10 generations, because the convert still feels the pain of the other nations. And that's why when he heard about all the Egyptians suffering, that was hard for him to handle. We're now in Yeshayahu chapter 10, where God is saying, I'm going to make the fat, we talked about how fat is good, thin. Okay, and in his b'mishmanav, in the fat of what he has, which is Sancheriv, it's talking about Sancheriv, and all the great he has, I'm going to make it very thin. My b'mishmanav razon, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yavo Chizkiyahu sheyesh lo shmona shemot, v'yipara miSancheriv sheyesh lo shmona shemot. Okay, what's going to happen to you? How am I going to be sholech b'mishmanav razon? Chizkiyahu is going to stand up against you. In other words, I'm going to deliver Chizkiyahu, right? Deliver you into the hands of Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu has 8 names. He's going to conquer you, who has 8 names. So Chizkiyahu d'chtiv. What are the 8 names of Chizkiyahu? And this is a pasuk in Yeshayahu in chapter 9 about the Mashiach, really. Ki yeled yulad lanu ben nitan lanu, v'tiyam Yisrael shechmo, v'kashmo pele yoetz el gibor avi ad sar shalom. Okay, those are the 8 names they're now saying are really the names of Chizkiyahu. Vayikach Chizkiyahu, but when counting the names, you miss the main name, Chizkiyahu. What about that? That's his real name. Say, no, not really. That's not his real name. That's the name that's the Tanakh name that they give a name so we can darshan it. Remember, we always have these names. What's his real name and what's the name he was given so that we can darshan it? So this was his drasha name. Shechizko Ya, that God strengthened him. Or davar acher, a different option. Chizkiyah shechizeket Yisrael lavihan shebashamayim. Right? One is God did it to him. The other is what did he do? He strengthened the Jewish people to go back to God. Okay, he did a reformation of the temple. And we're going to see, he got everyone to learn Torah according to the Midrash, okay? Because again, the Gemara always likes to take it to Torah learning and how important it is and how much it was going on way before. So we're going to get back to that. Sancheriv, what about his 8 names? And now we're going to take all these different names of different kings in the books from all different books actually even. And we're going to say that it was all the same person. The Midrash loves to do that, right? There are all these different characters. And they say, oh, that was all the same person, okay? Likely it wasn't all really the same person, but here we have it. We want to give him, kind of say it was like power against power. He had 8 names, they were equal, but then God deliver one into the hands of the other. So what are the names? Glapalesel, Palanesel, Shalmaneser, Pul, Sargon, Ansfar, Rabba, V'Yakira. Okay, Ansfar, Rabba, V'Yakira counted as three names, but really Ansfar is like a ruler that was Rabba, V'Yakira, that was great and honored. Okay, so it's really like a description of that, but it counted as 8 names here. Sancheriv, you forgot the main name. What about Sancheriv? Again, 2 interpretations. Shesichato Riv. His words are contentious. He causes fights with them. Or davar acher shesach b'nicher dvarim klapei mala, that he cursed God. Okay, now he didn't actually curse God himself, but he sent Rav Shakeh to curse God. If you remember, that's what Rav Shakeh does on the walls, and he curses God, and that's basically he was the messenger of Sancheriv. So Sancheriv cursed God again. They take Sancheriv and they take the letters Samach and Chet Sach, and they connect it with speech, which is really with a sin, but the drushes always do that. So we have Sichato Riv, either his words are contentious or he caused, wars between him and other people, or because he cursed God with his words. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, right? Where did he get that name from? In other words, that's like an honorable name. Okay, right. We're going to see, and maybe this is also why this is in this chapter. There's no real good and evil. It's not all black and white. Okay, we saw before Chizkiyahu, who was amazing, but yet had one critical thing he did wrong by not saying proper things. And we have Sancheriv, who was terrible, but did something positive. And that's why he did get some good name to him. So what did he do? He basically didn't say anything derogatory about Eretz Israel. Now, remember, what does he do? He takes the people he exiles them. So he says, remember the Malchut Yisrael. Shne'emal, it says on the Pasuk, ba'ui lakachat etchem el eretz ka'artzachem, until I come to take you to a land like your own. Meaning, I'm going to take you to some other land. It's like your land. Now, he could have said it's much better than your land, and that would be derogatory to Eretz Israel. But no, he said it's a land like your land, and it wasn't considered derogatory, and that's why he got a good name. Rav Shmuel. So now we're going to have an explanation about this line he said. Was this a smart thing to say, or was it not a very smart thing to say? Rav Shmuel, Chan Amar Melech Pikech. One said he was a very wise king, and when he said this, Uman Ta'amar, V'chad Amar Melech Tipesh. One said it was a stupid thing to say. Why? Lemanda Amar Melech Pikech Haya Iyamina Lehu Adifa Me'araychu. If I were to say, right, this is why it was a good thing to say, a smart thing to say. If I say it's better than your land, Amru Kamashakeret, they're going to say, of course he's lying, because what he wants to get the people to go willingly to this other place. I mean, he is exiling them. Nobody really wants to go. But if he says, I'm taking you to a better place, maybe that would be smart. But no, it's not smart because no one's going to believe him. So he said, an equal to. And then, okay, it doesn't sound so bad, and at least it's more believable. The Manda Amar Melech Tipeshaya, the one who said this is a foolish thing to say, in came my rivute. If so, then why would we go there? Okay, as if he says it's like your land, then we're like, well, that's not going to convince us to go anywhere. I don't want a place that's just like our land. If you tell me it's better, then it's worth my exiling. But if you tell me it's the same, then why would I leave my home to go to a place that's the same as where I am? So it wasn't necessarily a most convincing thing to say. Lahechan agliluhu. Now, where did he take them to Galut? So the pasuk says lechalachu lechavor, and it describes it, but the rabbis in the Gemara don't know what land that's talking about. So now the problem is we don't know what land the Amorim are talking about, but they obviously do. But we're going to read what they say without getting into where this is. The Koran has some explanations, some possibilities, at least for the first one, where it is, but it's not so clear where. And the second one, they even say no one really knows where this is. Marzutra Amar La Afriki, sounds like Africa, but probably not exactly Africa. We've seen Africa or something like that in the Gemara. Rabbi Chanin Amar Lahare Slug, okay, the mountains of Slug. Aval Yisrael, now again, we're using Sancheriv as a foil for the Jewish people, and this is not a good one. Yisrael Sipru B'Ginuta Shel Eretz Israel. The Jews, when they went to Galut, they actually spoke derogatorily about Israel. Kimatu Sos, when they got to a place that they later called Sos, they said, Amar Shavya Ki Aryan. This is like our land, this place. It's the same as our land, meaning, like you might say, what do you mean? This isn't like Eretz Israel. But no, they didn't say that. They said this is just like our land. Kimatu Almin, when they got to Almin, Karu Amru Ke'almin, and that's why it got its name. So, oh, this is like our Beit Olamim, which is like either Israel, it means, or Jerusalem. Okay, this is just like our Jerusalem, or just like our land. Kimatu Sos Tre, when they got to the second Sos, they called it Sos the second, Amre Al Chad Train. They said, oh, this is double the value, the double our land, basically. And then already they were really saying things not nice about Israel, because when they got there, they said, oh, this is even better than where we came from. V'tachak kvodo, now we're back to Sancheriv. So in Yishayahu Perek Yud, it talks about the problem with like what's going to happen to Sancheriv. Okay, this is just one second. It's in right. This is the continuation of the pasuk that Adon Hashem Tzvaot b'mashmanav razon. Right, and his fats will come, and in his plenty will come very little. V'tachak kvodo, and instead of his glory, yikad yikod kikod esh. Okay, he will blaze in fire like the fire blazes. So what does that mean? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, tachak kvodo, right, we say tachak kvodo means in place of his honor. But what do they understand tachak kvodo? Literally, under his kavod. V'lo kvodo mamash, it doesn't mean his glory. It means, ki had Rabbi Yochanan karle lemane machbedutai. Okay, it means under his clothing. Okay, which means the fire went under his clothing, but outside his body. And his body was going to be burned entirely. But Rabbi Elazar Amar, Tachak Kvodo Mamash. Kvodo, okay, now Kvodo here doesn't mean his glory. That's not what they meant. Kvodo means his body, like his flesh. So, Kisrifat B'nei Aharon. Mala Halan Srifat Neshama V'guf Kayam. Afkan Srifat Neshama V'guf Kayam, which we learned about earlier, right? That it burned on the inside. And his body was intact, but it burned from his insides completely. Tana Mishmei to Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. Now we're going to make another comparison. The Gemara is today all about comparing different people and using them as a foil to explain something. Paro shechiref ba'atzmo nifra kadosh baruch hu ba'atzmo. Paro that desecrated the name of God himself was then punished by God himself directly. Sancheriv, turning out to Amubet, shechiref al yedei shaliach. Sancheriv did it with a messenger. Nifra kadosh baruch hu mimenu al yedei shaliach. God punished him by a messenger. Okay, so now we're going to see this inside, even though some of it we spoke about. Paro dichtiv mi Hashem asher shma b'kolo. Paro said, "Who is God that I should listen to his name?" So he directly desecrated God's name. Nifra kadosh baruch hu mimenu ba'atzmo dichtiv vayina'el Hashem Mitzrayim b'toch hayam. Okay, God, right, shook Mitzrayim b'toch hayam. God did it himself. And dichtiv uchtiv darachta bayam susecha. Okay, the first one was a pasuk from Shemot, from the actual description. This is a pasuk in Chavakuk, which describes what happened. But Darachta b'yam susecha, it's saying about God that God put his led his horses by himself. Sancheriv dichtiv b'yam alachecha cherafta Adonai. Okay, so this is in a pasuk in Melachim Bet Yutet. Yishayahu comes to speak to Chizkiyahu, and he gives him a prophecy. And in the prophecy, it's like God saying, I'm talking to Sancheriv saying this. And he says to Sancheriv, B'yam malachecha cherafta. Okay, you curse God with your messenger, which is Rav Shakeh. Nifra kadosh baruch hu mimenu al yedei shaliach. And that's what we saw earlier, or I told you earlier, Dichtiv, Vayetze malach Hashem. Here's the pasuk. The angel of God went that night when the Syrians camped. Vayach b'machaneh Ashur 185,000, and they attacked the camp, and they died. 185,000 people died that night. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa Ran. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa now brings two psukim that contradict each other about Sancheriv. And when it describes Sancheriv in Yeshayahu Lamed Zayin is the first pasuk. That's what really it describes the battle of Chizkiyahu. The battle of Sancheriv against Chizkiyahu. It says, Sancheriv says, I'm going to go to Marom Kitzod. Okay, Marom is the heights of the edge. Okay, what it really means is, right, I'm going to get to the temple, which is the highest place. Remember, we learned that not so long ago. Uchtiv milon kitzo. In a different pasuk, it says the dwelling place, okay, where God dwells. So was he going to the Marom, the high place, or the Malon, the place where he dwells? Amaro to Rasha. So now they explain. That Rasha, meaning Sancheriv, said, B'tchila achriv di Rasha mata. First, I'm going to go to the house below, which is the Marom, the high place where God is. V'achar kach achriv di Rasha mala. Then I'm going to go to God's abode above, and I'm going to destroy that as well. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, my dichtiv. Okay, now we're in We're in Malachim Bet, in the description of the battle. Okay, and these are the words of Rav Shakeh. Rav Shakeh, when he's on the walls, he says, Ata hamibaladei Hashem aliti ala makom hazeh la'ashchito. You think I'm coming here not with God? I'm coming as a messenger of God to destroy you. Hashem amar elai alei al ha'aretz hazeh v'ashchita. God told me, go up to this land, to the Judean kingdom, and destroy it. So Gemara says, Mahi, right? Was Rav Shakeh a prophet that God told him that? Dishama l'navi, he overheard the Navi saying, right, again, Midrash, he overheard the Navi saying, Dekamar, Ya'an kima, or maybe they had good intelligence, Ya'an kima asa amazeh et mea shiloach holchim la'at, because this nation despised the mea shiloach, right, the shiloach waters, holchim la'at, that go slowly, that flow slowly, umisos, and instead they went to celebrate with or to be with et Ritzin uben Ramalyahu. Who's Ritzin? Who's ben Ramalyahu? If you remember Sefer Melachim, Ritzin was the king of Aram, and Pekach ben Ramalyahu was the king of Israel at the time. They had a pact, and what they're basically saying is that you went to be with them. Okay, now the beginning of the pasuk doesn't really make sense. They would despise the mea shiloach that go slowly. What does that have to do with anything? Amar Rav Yosef. So basically what Rav Shakeh is saying, well, look, you said, God said he's going to destroy you because, and we'll see even more what he says, right? That he says, I'm going to bring upon you the Assyrians because you did this. So now what did they do wrong? And what is the beginning of the pasuk? So Rav Yosef says, Amar Rav Yosef, if it weren't for the Targum, the translation of this pasuk, I would never understand what it's talking about. Here's the translation. This won't necessarily help you because it's Aramaic, but for him, this was very helpful. Chalaf dekatz ama hadem b'malchuta debeit David dimidaber lahom b'naich. Okay, because this nation did, in other words, they despised the malchuta beit David. Dimidaber, if you remember, Dabra is a manhig who led them b'naich. He led them calmly, but instead they left Beit David, who led them calmly. Ki mea shiloach denagde b'nachat, just like the mea shiloach streams slowly. David ruled the people calmly. Okay, but they left him, they despised him. And instead they went to make a pact with Aram and with the king of Israel. And that's why you're going to be destroyed. And he heard that and he said, oh, look, that means I can go attack them because we're supposed to destroy them. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So now we're going to go off on a tangent a bit about Pekach, and we're going to compare Pekach ben Ramalyahu to Chizkiyahu. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mai dachtiv me'erat Hashem bebeit rasha u'neveit tzadikim yivorach. Okay, here's a pasuk from Mishlei, which is the curse of God is in the house of the wicked, and in the abode of the tzadikim will be blessing. Okay, so what's the blessing and what's the curse? Me'erat Hashem bebeit rasha ze Pekach ben Ramalyahu. Okay, this pasuk, the Beit Rasha, is going to be Pekach, and the tzaddik is going to be Chizkiyahu. And what's the difference between them? Well, in Pekach ben Ramalyahu's house, Haya ochel 40 se'ah gozalot b'kinuach seudah. He would eat 40 se'ah of chicks for dessert. Meaning, what does this mean? It's a little bit of a strange thing. What it means is he would just be eating, never satiated. Okay, that's a curse. He would eat a small amount of vegetables and he'd be satiated with that, right? That he was satiated with very little. We're going to get back to this theme later in the daf also. Lachen. Okay, here's the rest of the pasuk, which is what Rav Shakeh is basically working on. It's the next pasuk. Lachen hine Adonai ma'aleh alehem et mei hanahar ha'atzumim v'harabim et melech Ashur. And because of that, I'm going to put upon you this huge stream, right? It's the mea shiloach that was benachat. Now you're going to be punished. And this huge stream is going to come and overwhelm you, the king of Ashur. Uchtiv, and it says there, we're going to also darshan this pasuk tomorrow in another way. V'chalaf b'Yudah shataf avar. It's going to basically, stream over, bring a huge push of water. Ad savar yageh. It's going to get up to the necks. Okay, this seems to be describing the destruction it's going to bring, right? When everything's going to be flooded over by the king Ashur. But we're going to see tomorrow, we're going to darshan it a little differently. Elamai time yanish. So now the question is, okay, if Rav Shakeh was going with the word of God, then why was he punished? Navi aseret hashvatim itnabei. Rav Shakeh didn't get his intel fully correct. That was to destroy the Israelites and the 10 tribes. but not to destroy Jerusalem. Ba Naviva Amarle, and the Navi said to him, okay, here's another pasuk, this is in the same chapter, but later in the chapter. Kilo, we're in chapter 8 of Yeshayahu. Kilo mu'af la'asher mutzaka. Okay, again, a hard pasuk to understand what that means. Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Brechia, ein nimsar am ayef b'Torah, and here we're going to get into the Torah. Kilo mu'af, from the lashon of ayef, tired, not to a nation who's tired because of learning Torah, because learning Torah tires you out, it's hard work. Biyad mi hamatziklo. In other words, those who are tired because they learn Torah will not be given over to the one who's trying to overtake it. My ka'et, okay, now we're going to quote another pasuk. Okay, this is also from, this is the end of that pasuk, the continuation of that pasuk, actually. My ka'et harishon hekel artza zvulun va'artza naftali va'acharon ichbid derech hayam ever yarden galil hagoyim. Okay, another impossible pasuk to understand. Okay, like the first one, who is hekel, lighter, the land of Zvulun, the land of Naphtali. The later one is Hichbid, the opposite of Kal. Kal is light and Hichbid is heavy. Derech Hayam, Ever Yarden, through the water, across the Jordan. Galil Hagoyim, the rolling, the wheel of the Gentiles. Very hard to understand. So now let's see how they darshan it. Lo karishonim shehekelu me'alehem or Torah. The lightness and the Rishonim is the Israelite kingdom that was taken to exile. You're not like the early ones who took lightly the whole issue of Ola Torah. They said, oh, this isn't for us. Aval achronim, but you're the later ones, sheichbidu alehem Ol Torah, that they took it very seriously and really took to it. Uruyin halalu. Now, what's the Ovrei Yam and the Dorchei Yarden, the Evrei Yarden? These people are ra'oi, they're so worthy that la'asot lahem nes ki Ovrei Hayamu ki Dorchei Hayarden. Okay, they're worthy of miracles like going through the Yam Suf, like crossing the Jordan. Im chozer bo mutav. If the Assyrian king changes his mind, great. Bim lav, and if not, ani aseo to galil bagoyim. Okay, which in the current they translate as wallowing in shame to right, and they'll be so destroyed they'll wallow in shame, like kind of roll around in shame among all the other nations. Okay, and that's the pasuk basically describing why this isn't going to work, what Sancheriv wants to do. Now it says, okay, in Divrei Yamim, now we're switching psukim. Achar hadvarim v'haemet ha'ele bas Sancheriv melech Ashur vayavo b'Yehuda vayichan al ha'arim ha'btzurot vayomer levik'am elav. So what happened? After these words and truth, we're going to figure out what are the words and the truth, okay? Then Sancheriv came, he comes to Yehuda, he camps on their cities, their fortified cities, and he wants to basically destroy them and to kind of take them on to be his. Hai Rishana Lahai Paradashna, this is the gift for his gift, meaning Chizkiyahu did so much good. What? This is what he gets? This is his reward? Acharei advarim v'ha'emet. So achar mai, what is this after? Amaravina la'achar shekafatz hakadosh baruch hu v'nishba. After God jumped up and swore. That's what the dvarim and then the emet. He took an oath. V'amar, and he said, look, if I say, listen, I'm going to bring Sancheriv and I'm going to give you into his hands, meaning I'll deliver him to you, you'll win the war, don't worry. He'll say to me, right? Imagine someone says, you're going to have a war, but you're going to win. What will you say? Hashamar, lo hubina, I don't want him. I'd rather just not have a war. Like, why should I have a war and then beat him in war, right? I don't want him. Velo bi'itute bina. I don't want the fear of him, right? I'm going to go to war. It's going to cause fear. I don't want to deal with all this. God got up and jumped up and swore, no, I promise I'm going to deliver him into your hands. You don't have to be fearful of him at all. Shene'amal, Nishba Hashem, now we're quoting from Yeshayahu Yudalid, so they're connecting the Dvarim v'ha'emet to this oath that appears in Yeshayahu Yudalid. Nishba Hashem tzvot lemor, im lo ka'asher dimiti ken hayata, v'chasher ya'atzti takum, lishbor ashur ba'artzi va'al harei avusenu, v'sar me'alehem ulo v'subalo me'al shechmo yasu. Basically, this is an oath of God saying, right? This will be, and whatever I say will happen, which is you will break the Assyrians in your land, and on my mountains, Avusenu, we're going to see in a minute how they darshan that, and Visara, right? All the yoke of him and all that will be basically, off of you. You'll be free of it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So now we're going to explain this as al Hari Avusenu. This is going to connect with an idea we talked about earlier. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yavo Sancheriv v'siyato. Actually, maybe it doesn't connect so much. I was thinking of something else. We'll get back to that. Yavo Sancheriv v'siyato v'yaseh evus lechizkiyahu l'siyato. He will become the evus. What's the evus? That's the feeding trough for the animals. But here it means they will be a source of sustenance to Chizkiyahu and his people. Because why? They're going to take all the booty from the war, which we'll get back to. Okay, now we're going to, or shamen. So now we're saying, right, again, another pasuk. This pasuk, I forgot to check where this one is. This pasuk is in Yeshayahu chapter 10, which we were at before. Okay, and on that day, what will happen? All right, the burden will not be upon you anymore. His burden and chubal ol mipnei shamen. This, right, this will all be taken off of you, the yoke of Sancheriv, because of shamen, or from the shamen. We don't know what this means. So what's the drasha? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, chubal ol Sancheriv mipnei shamno shel Chizkiyahu. We're going to take this word shaman and say it actually refers to shemen, oil. What was the oil? The oil that he kept lit where? B'batei midrashot u'batei knesiot, or batei knesiot u'batei midrashot. Okay, it was the oil that he kept lit so that people could learn Torah. Masa, this is going to sound a little scary, and I don't know if this would be so encouraging, but apparently this worked. Okay, I wouldn't try it at home. What did he do? Na'atz cherev al petach beit hamidrash. He put a sword at the entrance to the beit hamidrash. If you don't come to my Beit Midrash to learn Torah, interesting way to encourage people, you will be pierced by this sword. But so they checked from Dan to Beersheba. There were no Amei Haaretz. There were no one who was in ignoramus. Everybody knew everything. They checked from Gvat to Antipatris. These are different places. They didn't find not a child, male or female, not a man or woman. Okay, everyone's mentioned here. Notice another source for Torahs for everyone, right? Remember, we just had that the other day, Morashah L'Chol Yisrael, also here, who didn't know, right, all the halachot of Tum'ah and Ta'ara, right? The most complicated of all the halachot, everybody knew them. But on this generation, it was said, Yeshayahu Zion, again, flipping back. Here comes back to the theme we talked about before. Everyone will have an egel bakar and chutzon, which is not a lot, okay? But they'll be satiated. Places which could grow elef gefem for elef kesef. You could have a lot of vines and get a lot of money, but people are going to have like almost nothing there, but they're going to be satiated with that. And people will be satisfied with very little. And why will they have very little? Because they're spending their days learning Torah, not working in the fields. Okay, that's the whole idea. They'll learn Torah and they'll be happy with very little. That was what we talked about Chizkiyahu before, that he would eat a little bit of food as opposed to Pekach, who needed a ton of food. These people won't even need a lot of food. Okay, now we're in Yeshayahu Lamed Gimel, where it's really like the whole description of the battle, and it says you're going to collect the shalal like the locusts collect. So Amar lahem Navi Yisrael isfu shalachem. So the Navi said, go collect your booty. Amar lo livzos o lachlok. Are we collecting it for ourselves, or are we collecting it to have to give to the king or something? Amar lahem ka'osef hachasil. That's why he said, like the locusts that they collect for themselves. Just like they collect each one for themselves. So you will collect this all for each other, for yourselves. Amrulo, they say to him, wait a minute, we have a halachic problem. There's stolen property from Jews. We can't take this. He said to them, okay, like the locusts advance, he should advance. What does that mean? So now it's the Gevim or locusts, but Gevim also could be pools of water. So he says, why do you use the word Gevim instead of Chasil? Ma Gevim halalu ma'alim et ha'adam mituma l'tara. Just like mitzvahs of water change someone from impure to pure. Again, a reference to Tuma and Tara. Af mamonam shel Yisrael kevan shenafal biyad umot ha'olam miyad tihel. Okay, the money of the Jews that was given to the Gentiles, it immediately became pure. Okay, meaning it's not stolen anymore. Why is it not stolen? Remember all the halachot in Bava Kama? Once there's shinoi balim, right? Like things change ownership, it already means they're not stolen anymore and you can have it. Okay, now we're going to start the whole next section. We're just going to get to the beginning of it, about the day that Sancheriv comes to attack the Jerusalem, and why doesn't he succeed? So Amar Rav Huna Eser Masot Nasau Torah Shabbat Yom. This is what we're going to call later. We'll see. It's Kfitzat Haderech, where all of a sudden a long path was made very short. He went to 10 places. We're going to read the pasuk. You can start counting and realize it's actually 12, and that's where we're going to end our daf today. And with that question, Eser Masot Nasau Torah Shnema Baal Ayit. Avar. Okay, Ayit is 1. Avar b'Miglon 2. Lemichmas Yafki Kelav, and Michmas is the 3rd place. Avru Ma'abara. They went through Ma'abara. That's 4. Geva Malon Lanu, that was a place where I guess we slept, even though they didn't, because it was all Boto Ayom. Charda HaRama, okay, Rama is 6. Givat Shaul Nasa is 7. Sahali Kolech Bat Galim, that's in Haifa. Okay, that's 8. Hakshivi Laisha is 9. Aniya Anatot, poor Anatot is 10. Nadida Madmena, that's 11. Yoshvei HaGevim Heizu, those who live in Gevim. So Izu, so that's 12. So now we have, so they said 10 places, and then they list this pasuk, which lists 12. Okay, this is right. This is in Yeshayahu pasuk Perek Yud. Okay, we're back to there. So now the Gemara says Hanituv Yahavin. This is more than 12. So what they're going to do is we'll start this tomorrow, which is they're going to start saying, oh, some of these aren't really places, and they were really descriptions of something else. And they're going to take 3 off, which is going to give us a problem because then we're going to get to 9 and not 10, and the numbers aren't going to match up, and we'll have to figure that out. So what did we do today? It's a little bit of a hard daf to summarize because it was sort of all over the place. We started with the Daniel and Nehemiah comparison and the Chagai Zechariah Malachi comparison. Then we got to this other drasha of Rabbi Tanchum, because he was appear before with Daniel, about the men and how the men was closed men, and that was because we had the whole first theme. The Chizkiyahu did not sing praises to God after he was saved in this miraculous manner. Then we talked about how was Sancheriv, that he actually had something good for him because he didn't say terrible things about Israel. On the other hand, right, we talked about how he was burned to Yekod Eish. We talked about, I'm not summarizing really everything, but he talked about the Rav Shakeh and the cursing and how he cursed through the angel. We compared him to Paro, who did it directly and was cursed and was basically punished directly from God, whereas Sancheriv's people were punished by an angel. And then we had the thing about what Rav Shakeh claimed that he had a prophecy from God, but he got it wrong because it wasn't really on Jerusalem. It was on the 10 tribes, which he had already succeeded in. And then we basically get to when the promise that God gives that he will help Chizkiyahu. And then, what helped Chizkiyahu? And that was that he got everyone to learn Torah. And that's the Gemara loves to just put in the importance of learning Torah and put it, read it into earlier stories. And then we talked about the Shalal a little bit, and then we get to Sancheriv's path he took on that day to get there. And we're going to see tomorrow really what brought upon his downfall. That we finished for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and B'sorot Tovot and all this discussion of war and difficult times and victory. So wishing B'sorot Tovot.